Have you ever watched someone hurt your child and realized the people hurting her were your own family? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And what happened less than 24 hours later changed our family forever. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 38 years old. I'm a father. And if there's one thing I learned in life, it's this. You can tolerate people insulting you. You can tolerate people doubting you. You can even tolerate people disrespecting you. But the moment they hurt your child, everything changes. My daughter Emily was 7 years old, bright, kind, creative, the type of kid who smiled at strangers and believed everyone had good intentions. She trusted people easily, especially family. That's why what happened hurt so much. She never saw it coming. Neither did I. It all started at my parents' annual family reunion, a massive event they hosted every summer. Dozens of relatives, friends, neighbors, business associates, everyone came. For years I avoided these gatherings, not because I hated my family, because I was tired of being compared to my younger brother Michael. Michael was the favorite, always had been. According to my parents, Michael could do no wrong. When he failed, it wasn't his fault. When he made mistakes, someone else was responsible. When he succeeded, everyone celebrated. Meanwhile, no matter what I achieved, it was never enough. I built my own company. Silence. Bought my own home. Silence. Created a stable life. Silence. But if Michael bought a new watch, the entire family acted like he'd won an Olympic medal. After years of this, I stopped caring. Or at least I thought I did. The only reason I attended family events now was Emily. She loved seeing cousins, loved family gatherings, loved feeling included. So when my mother called and insisted we come, I agreed. Big mistake. The moment we arrived, I felt something was off. The atmosphere seemed strange, forced, artificial. My mother greeted us, but barely acknowledged Emily. My father did the same. At first I ignored it. I told myself I was imagining things. Then I noticed something. Huge banners covered the backyard, professional decorations, a large stage, expensive catering. This wasn't a normal family reunion. It was another celebration for Michael. Of course it was. Apparently he had launched another business venture. The fifth one in 7 years. Most of them failed, but somehow every attempt became a family holiday. Emily looked around excitedly. "Dad, can I go play with the other kids?" I smiled. Of course. She ran off happily. And for a while, everything seemed normal. Then came the talent showcase. Every year kids performed small acts, singing, dancing, magic tricks, simple fun. Emily had spent weeks preparing. Weeks. Every evening after school she'd practiced. She wasn't trying to win. She just wanted Grandpa and Grandma to be proud. That was the heartbreaking part. She still believed they would be. When her name was announced, she nervously walked onto the stage. I immediately pulled out my phone, ready to record, ready to support her. She took a deep breath, smiled, and began her presentation. She had created a short speech about kindness, combined with drawings she'd made herself. The audience initially listened politely. Then someone laughed, a loud laugh. I looked toward the crowd. Michael, my brother, the family favorite. He was laughing, not with her, at her. Emily froze. For a second she looked confused. Then another person laughed. Then another. Then another. And suddenly several adults were whispering, smirking, mocking. My stomach dropped. Because the worst part wasn't the laughter. It was my parents. They weren't stopping it. They were smiling. Actually smiling. As their 7-year-old granddaughter stood frozen on stage. Humiliated. Embarrassed. Heartbroken. Emily's voice started shaking. She looked toward my parents, looking for support, looking for encouragement, looking for anything. She found nothing. Then Michael said something I'll never forget. "Ladies and gentlemen, give her a hand. Maybe she'll become a motivational speaker." More laughter, louder this time, crueler. Emily's eyes immediately filled with tears. My daughter looked down, trying not to cry, trying to stay brave, trying to finish. But she couldn't. She quietly stepped away from the microphone and walked off the stage, tears running down her face. The crowd awkwardly shifted. Some people looked uncomfortable, others pretended nothing happened. But my parents? They still said nothing. That's when something inside me snapped. Not anger, not rage, something colder, something stronger. Clarity. I stood up, walked directly toward Emily, and wrapped my arms around her. She was shaking. "Dad?" Her voice cracked. "Why were they laughing?" That question broke my heart, because she genuinely didn't understand. She hadn't done anything wrong, and I wasn't about to let her believe she had. I looked at my parents, then at Michael. For a few seconds nobody spoke. Finally my mother shrugged. It wasn't that serious. That sentence changed everything, because in that moment, I realized exactly who they were, and more importantly, who they would never be. I picked up Emily, turned around, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, my father called out, "Daniel, don't be dramatic." I stopped, slowly turned around, and looked directly at him. Then I said the words that would haunt them by morning. "You have no idea what you've just done." And with that, I left. What my family didn't know, what none of them knew, was that by sunrise, their lives would look very different. That night, Emily barely spoke. The entire drive home was silent. Not because she was angry, because she was hurt. And sometimes pain is too deep for words. I tucked her into bed, sat beside her, and waited. Finally, she looked up at me. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" She hesitated. "Grandma and Grandpa don't like me, do they?" The question hit harder than any insult they had thrown at me, because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about a 7-year-old girl trying to understand why the people she loved had laughed at her. I took a deep breath. "No." She looked confused. "No what?" I gently smiled. "They don't dislike you." Then why did they laugh? For a second I couldn't answer. Because the truth was complicated. Some people become so obsessed with favorites, they stop seeing everyone else. And that's exactly what had happened to my family. Emily slowly nodded, though I could tell she didn't fully understand. Before falling asleep, she whispered something I'll never forget. "I thought they were proud of me." Then she turned over and quietly cried herself to sleep. I sat there for nearly an hour, watching my daughter sleep, listening to her soft breathing, trying to calm the anger building inside me. Not anger at the humiliation, not anger at Michael, anger at myself. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't the first warning sign. I'd spent years making excuses for my family, years pretending things would improve, years believing they would eventually treat Emily differently. I was wrong, and now my daughter was paying the price. At exactly 6:17 the next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my father. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, he called again, then again, then again. Something was wrong, very wrong, because my father never chased people, especially not me. Finally, I answered. "What?" The panic in his voice immediately caught my attention. "Daniel, where are you?" I frowned. "At home. We need to talk." "No." "Daniel, please." The word please sounded strange coming from him, almost unnatural. Then he said something that made me sit upright. "It's about Michael." My stomach tightened. "What happened?" Silence. Then he answered, "Everything." An hour later, I arrived at my parents' house. The atmosphere was completely different from the day before. Nobody was smiling. Nobody was celebrating. Nobody was laughing. Especially Michael. The family favorite looked terrified. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, his confidence gone. For the first time in years, Michael looked human. Not special, not untouchable, just scared. I sat down, crossed my arms, and waited. Finally, my father spoke. Michael's company collapsed. I blinked. What? Apparently sometime during the night. A major investor had pulled out. Then another. Then another. Several contracts disappeared. Several business partners backed away. And suddenly everything began falling apart. Within hours, the company was facing disaster. I listened quietly. Then something clicked. A name. One of the investors they mentioned. Then another. Then another. I knew all of them. Very well. Because years earlier, my company had acquired several firms connected to those investors. The business world was smaller than most people realized. And overnight, news about Michael's behavior had spread. Not because I started it, because dozens of people attended the reunion. Someone recorded the incident. Someone uploaded it. And people saw exactly what happened. A grown man publicly humiliating a child, a family laughing at a little girl, a grandfather and grandmother doing nothing. The video spread much faster than anyone expected, especially among professional circles, and people didn't like what they saw. Investors pay attention to character. Partners pay attention to reputation. Clients pay attention to behavior. And Michael's reputation had just taken a massive hit. My mother looked devastated. It was supposed to be private. I almost laughed. Public humiliation is never private, especially when someone records it. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Michael looked directly at me. For the first time in his life, the favorite child needed help. Daniel. I remained silent. You know these people. There it was, the real reason I had been called. Not guilt, not remorse, not accountability, desperation. He continued. If you make a few calls. I immediately stood up. No. The room froze. Michael looked shocked. What do you mean, no? I slowly looked around the room, at my parents, at my brother, at the people who laughed while my daughter cried. Then I spoke calmly. The same little girl you humiliated yesterday cried herself to sleep. Nobody said anything. Not one of you called to apologize. Still silence. Not one of you asked if she was okay. My mother started crying. Too late. Much too late. Then I looked directly at Michael. You laughed at a child. His eyes dropped. And now you're asking me for help. For the first time, nobody had an answer. Because deep down, they knew I was right. But what happened next would shock them even more. Because less than 24 hours after humiliating my daughter, they were about to discover who I had become. The room was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even looked at each other. For the first time in my life, my family wasn't looking down on me. They were looking up at me, and they hated it. Not because I was successful, because they suddenly realized how badly they had misjudged me. My father cleared his throat. Daniel. I held up my hand. No. For years I had listened. For years I had accepted excuses. For years I had remained quiet. Not anymore. I looked directly at Michael. Do you know what bothered me most yesterday? He lowered his head. The laughing? I shook my head. The fact that Emily trusted you. The room became even quieter. She thought you were her favorite uncle. Michael's eyes immediately filled with regret. She spent weeks preparing that presentation. Nobody spoke. She wanted her family to be proud of her. My mother started crying again. And instead, I paused. You taught her that some people only care when they're the center of attention. Michael couldn't even look at me anymore. For the first time, the truth hurt, as it should. Then my father stood up, slowly, carefully, like a man carrying years of guilt. I failed her. I looked at him. He continued. I failed Emily. His voice cracked. And I failed you. For a moment, nobody spoke, because those words had taken decades to arrive. Decades. My mother looked at me through tears. We were wrong. Simple words. But after years of favoritism, They carried weight, real weight. Then something unexpected happened. My father walked upstairs. Several minutes passed. When he returned, he was carrying a box, a large cardboard box. He placed it on the table. Inside were photographs, awards, certificates, newspaper articles, old report cards, business magazines, all mine. My heart stopped. What is this? My father looked ashamed. Everything we should have celebrated. The room froze, because suddenly I understood. They had kept everything, every achievement, every milestone, every success. They just never acknowledged them. Not publicly. Not the way they celebrated Michael. My father picked up an old newspaper clipping. The article featured my company, one of the biggest business publications in the state. You built something incredible. His voice broke. And I spent years pretending it wasn't important. For the first time, I saw genuine regret. Not because Michael needed help, because he finally understood the damage he'd caused. Then my mother handed me another photograph, a picture of Emily, taken years earlier. On the back she had written something. We should have loved her better. That sentence hit harder than anything else, because finally, they weren't talking about me. They were talking about my daughter, the child they had hurt, the child who deserved better. Several hours later, I made a decision. Not for my parents, not for Michael, for Emily. Because children learn from what they see, and I wanted her to learn strength, not bitterness, accountability, not revenge. So I looked at Michael. You don't need me to save your company. His face fell. Then I continued. But I will help you learn how to rebuild it. Everyone looked shocked, even Michael. Why? I smiled slightly. Because nobody ever grew from being rescued. Then I looked directly at him. But people can grow from consequences. And for the first time in his life, Michael nodded. Not like the favorite child, like a man finally accepting responsibility. That evening I returned home. Emily ran toward me, immediately wrapping her arms around me. I hugged her tightly. Then I asked a question. If Grandma and Grandpa apologized, would you listen? She thought about it for several seconds. Then she nodded. Because children are often kinder than adults. The following weekend my parents visited. No excuses, no defensiveness, no pretending, just honesty. My father sat in front of Emily and apologized. A real apology, the kind most adults never give. My mother apologized too. And surprisingly, Emily accepted. Not because she forgot what happened, because she chose not to carry it forever. Months later, things looked very different. Michael worked hard. Actually hard. For the first time. My parents changed, slowly, but genuinely. And Emily? She entered another talent showcase, this time with a new presentation. When she finished, the audience stood and applauded, including my parents, including Michael. And this time, nobody laughed. As the applause echoed through the room, I looked at my daughter. She was smiling, confident, happy. And I realized something important. The greatest revenge isn't watching people fail. It's watching the people you love succeed despite everything. Less than 24 hours after they publicly shamed my daughter, my family learned a lesson they would never forget. Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. And children remember how you make them feel. So choose kindness, choose encouragement, choose love, because one careless moment can hurt a child, but one sincere apology can begin healing. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional family betrayal, justice, and redemption stories. And remember, never underestimate a quiet child or the parent who stands beside them. The end.